Once upon a time, there was a rich king who ruled a kingdom. The king usually went to his garden because he liked this one apple tree with lots of ripe apples. One time, the king talked to the apple tree.
My precious apple tree, I wish that if anyone dared to steal my apples, they would be buried deep underground.
Unfortunately, the king's wish came true. The king asked the guards to watch the garden all day and night, and no one is allowed to enter his precious garden. The king had only one daughter, Princess Felinia, so he really loved the princess. One day, Princess Felinia was walking in the garden. The guards knew that the king really loved the princess, so even though there was a ban, they did not stop her. The princess enjoyed watching the king's precious apple tree. As she looked at the ripe, red apples, she really wanted to taste them.
There are so many apples on this tree. If I only take one, no one will find out.
Felinia excitedly picked one apple. Suddenly, the ground fell out from beneath her feet. Felinia fell down and disappeared. The ground then returned to normal. When they heard the scream, the guards immediately came. They panicked when they saw the princess falling underground. They rushed to tell the king.
Quickly spread the news. Whoever can find the princess will be rewarded generously.
One day, 3 hunters came to see the king at the same time and offered to save the princess. Their names were Ben, Mark, and Enda. The youngest was Enda, who was a gentle and kind man. In contrast, Ben and Mark were very devious. The king was very happy. He asked all of them to go together so they could support each other. They obeyed the king and set off on their journey together. Along the way, they gradually became closer. Enda was young and kind, so Ben and Mark often teased him and called him an idiot. On the way, they found an old castle. They decided to rest there.
Now there are 3 of us. If any one of us find the princess, we have to share the rewards with the other 2.
I'm fine with that. Yes, I agree.
All right, then let's split up. One person will stay in the castle to cook, and the other 2 will go hunting and search for Princess Felinia.
That's okay. I will stay in the castle.
No, I am the oldest one here. I will stay in the castle to cook.
I am fine with anything.
Because they couldn't argue with Ben, Mark and Enda had to go out to find food and look for the princess. Ben sat in the yard to cook. The smell of delicious barbecue attracted a tiny man. He was very small, and his clothes were ragged and dirty. The tiny man approached Ben and said,
Hey man, I've been starving for a few days. Could you please give me some food to eat? Oh, just a ragged, ugly tiny man. Go away. You don't deserve to eat my barbecue.
The tiny person got angry. His face turned red. He recited a spell. Immediately, a wind blew past the house, bringing all the dust from the ground toward Ben. After the wind passed by, Ben's face and body were full of dirt. He now looked just like the tiny man. Meanwhile, Mark and Enda were on the way back. Mark complained to Enda.
It's so unfair. That Ben guy is so selfish. He always chooses the easy job. Please don't be angry. Tomorrow you can stay at home to rest. Ben and I will come here to find food.
Only you think so. We must quickly find the princess and get out of this forest.
Mark and Enda finally arrived home. When they saw Ben's appearance, They started laughing so hard.
Why do you look so dirty? It's so funny.
Dan angrily looked at them. He decided not to warn them and just thought,
Just keep laughing. When it's your turn to stay home, you guys will have to suffer from the strange wind.
The next day, it was Mark's turn to stay in the castle. When Mark was grilling the meat, the rag-tiny man appeared again. Mark was very surprised.
Hey man, I've been starving for a few days. Could you please give me some food to eat?
Just like Ben, Mark chased the tiny man away.
You're an ugly, poor tiny man. There's nothing here for you. Get out.
The tiny man got angry and his face turned red. A strong wind blew again, bringing all the dust on the ground towards Mark. As the wind passed, Mark was as dusty and dirty as the tiny man. When Ben and Dana returned, they saw Mark's appearance and they started laughing at him. Ben and Mark looked at each other and found out they both suffered the same thing. Both of them kept silent and didn't warn Enda because they wanted Enda to suffer too. The next day, it was Enda's turn to stay in the castle to cook and clean. And again, when Enda was grilling meat, the poor tiny man appeared and begged him.
Hey man, please give me some food to eat. I have been starving for a few days.
Oh, poor tiny man. Come here quickly and have some meat.
Without thinking, Enda gave his barbecue to the tiny man. He saved the rest for Ben and Mark. The tiny man really enjoyed the food. After eating, he smiled and thanked Enda.
Thank you, young man. I am very full now. You're a very kind person. Why? Why'd you here?
Enda told the tiny man the whole story. The tiny man nodded and said,
You found the right place. I show you the way underground to save Princess Felinia. In this castle, there's a big dry well in the garden. You can find your way down from there. The princess is locked down there behind the stone door because she violated her father's curse. Open the stone door and you will free her from the curse. But you must remember to do that alone. And be careful with your two friends. They are not good people. I will give you this ring. It will come in handy in case of an emergency.
After saying that, the tiny man disappeared. Enda was very excited because he knew that he had been helped by a magical creature. Enda told the story to Ben and Mark. Just like what the tiny man described, they found a dry well in the garden behind the castle. However, Ben and Mark were terrified just by looking down the deep well. Enda volunteered to go down.
I'll go to see how deep it is.
Ben and Mark immediately agreed. They held the rope for Enda to go to the bottom of the well. Enda discovered the pathway. He followed the tunnel and carefully searched for the stone door, just like what the tiny man had told him. Finally, after searching for a long time, Enda found a cave with a stone door. He happily opened the door and entered the cave. Princess Felinia was sitting all by herself in the dark cave. She was very delighted when she saw someone coming to save her. Just seeing Felinia, Enda fell in love with her beauty at once. Princess Felinia also fell in love with the brave young man who dared to come here to save her.
I'm Enda. I'm here to save you, Princess Felinia. Let's get out of here together.
Hello, it's me, Princess Felinia.
Nice to meet you, Princess. The king ordered me to come here to save you.
I've been waiting for so long for this. Thank you.
Enda took Princess Felinia back to the bottom of the well. He pulled the rope as a sign to his two friends. Enda put the princess in the basket. The basket was slowly pulled up. Ben and Mark were delighted to see the princess. They dropped the basket down again for Enda. When he was about to step on the basket, Enda suddenly remembered the reminder from the tiny man.
Be careful with your two friends. They're not good people.
Enda decided to test them. He put a large rock into the basket for them to pull up. Just like the tiny man said, Ben and Mark were very jealous of Enda, who saved the princess, so they planned to cut the rope to kill Enda.
Enda, please sit tight in the basket. Mark and I will pull you up.
But after a while, Mark cut the rope, the basket fell down. Then Mark shouted,
Oh my God, the rope was broken.
The basket and the rock fell to the bottom of the well, shattered into pieces right in front of Enda. Enda was shocked to see the cruelty of his friends.
Luckily, I had been warned. Otherwise, I would have died.
Mark and Ben quickly looked down the bottom of the well and listened carefully. There was no sound below, so they were sure that Enda was dead. They happily went back to the castle. Ben and Mark told Felinia that Enda had an accident and died at the bottom of the well. They also advised her to return to the palace with them. Felinia believed them.
Huh?
She was very sad and bursted into tears. Mark, Ben, and the princess went back to the palace together. The king was overjoyed to see Felinia safe and sound, and he rewarded Ben and Mark generously. They were fighting each other to marry the beautiful Princess Felinia. The king was confused because he didn't know who he should marry the princess to. Since Felinia returned to the palace, she was always sad and never said a word. The king was very worried about his daughter, but he did not know what to do. Meanwhile, Enda, who had been left at the bottom of the well, still couldn't find a way to escape yet. He was rubbing his hands together for some warmth when he found the ring of the tiny man on his hands. Immediately, the magical tiny man appeared in front of Enda. He told the tiny man the whole story.
Lucky me that I remembered what you told me. That's why I'm still alive. I didn't expect they could be that cruel.
I already told you to be careful of them. Don't worry, I'll touch you up right now.
As soon as the tiny man finished his words, Enda found himself standing on the ground. Enda was delighted. He thanked the tiny man and set out to return to the king's palace. Enda returned to the palace and went to see the king and the princess. Felinia was very happy. She immediately took his hand. The king was glad to see Felinia smiling cheerfully again. Felinia told his father that it was Enda who saved her, not Ben and Mark.
Father, Enda here is the one who saved me.
Enda also told the king that Ben and Mark were very cunning and had tried to kill him. The king became furious.
Guards, quickly imprison these two evil hunters for me. Do not release them until they realize their sins.
The king kept his promise to reward Enda generously. Enda and Felinia both fell deeply in love with each other. They asked the king for his blessing. The king was also pleased when his daughter had found a kind and courageous young man. Their wedding was held in a palace with the presence of the king. They lived happily together ever after.
Radio AD, thông điệp từ âm thanh. Hotline 0989 612 668. Truy cập website www.radiovietnam.com.vn để biết thêm chi tiết.